Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Katerji Show with me, your host, Katerji. I hope you're all having a good evening this Thursday evening, as we saw quite momentous scenes overnight with Volodymyr Zelensky meeting with the Syrian president Ahmed al-Sharaa, formally restoring diplomatic relations. Those relations have been broken off at the outset of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the full-scale invasion, with Syria under Assad backing Russia's action, basically. So diplomatic relations were officially broken off then. And seeing those scenes with Zelensky meeting with al-Sharaa in New York was something that I saw both Syrians and Ukrainians celebrating. So hopefully a new chapter in relations between Kiev and Damascus. Something positive to see in an environment where so many foreign policy stories are full of negativity. So something positive there to bring you before we go into more of Russia's shenanigans. So bear with me tonight because my guest has a name that I might struggle to pronounce. Vytautas Jokubauskas, Lithuanian journalist based in Vilnius and the foreign editor of the LRT Radio. Can I introduce my guest now? Welcome to the show, Vytautas.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Happy to, glad for the opportunity to share the stories about Russian sabotage in Eastern Europe. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Just a shout out to everyone who's made it into the chat already. Welcome, everyone. The only way to engage with the show, to chat to us live and to send questions to me or Vytautas is to jump onto Twitch, create an account, jump onto Twitch and send us a message through there. You can watch it on Twitter, but you can't engage with the show. So please do. I'm encouraging my Twitter followers. So many thousands of you tune in, week in, week out. So it'd be nice if you jump on and please do send over a question or two, because this is a topic that we might not have been paying much attention to, but it is major, major news in the Baltic states. But before we start that, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Vytautas, and your background, so people should know why to listen to you?
Sure. For about a decade, a bit more than a decade, I've been working for various news outlets in Lithuania as a journalist. Mostly for the time I was focused on the internet website media. For example, Delphi is technically the biggest website by viewership, but it kind of also has this reputation of being a little bit clickbaity sometimes. So I worked there for 5 years at the beginning of my career, let's say, and worked there as a news editor, and then half the time as a foreign news editor, basically getting to know myself with the foreign news whole atmosphere. And after around 5 years, I've switched to a Verslo Žinios. It's our version of, kind of a small version of Financial Times, where basically it's a very limited audience for small business owners and stuff like that, just to broaden a little bit my horizons. And around 2 years ago, there was an opportunity opening here in LRT to move to the radio to cover the public radio foreign news. And that was basically the topics that always interested me the most. And there was a good spot for they needed reinforcements. And I was just happy to try to reorientate myself from the written media into the radio format. So I've been doing this for the past 2 years. And of course, war in Ukraine, Russian aggression has been always at least on the forefront, and also sometimes a little bit in the background, but it's kind of always there in just geographically wise, I guess.
Well, look, I mean, that's fantastic, and you are in the right position to be telling us about, this story that really has quite a significant global importance, but it is essentially a local story for you. Now, we understand that Lithuania has brought charges, or rather the Lithuanian authorities have brought charges against 15 people, have I got that right, in relation to a plot to blow up parcels. Now, can you explain it to us from the very beginning? Take us right to the start.
There are multiple countries involved in the investigation. It's not just Lithuania. There's close cooperation with the prosecutors from Poland and various other countries. the investigation itself revealed that it was not just a single act of sabotage or like a single person doing things, but it was more of a network of a widespread Russian intelligent covert operations that was operating here from Vilnius as a base, but it also affected other countries, Poland, also United Kingdom. Latvia was a target, but it was prevented just before one of these operations was launched.
So take us back to what was the plot, because I don't think a lot of people have really understood what this plot was. So what, in very easy to understand terms, what were the Russians trying to do here?
Yes. Short shout out for my colleague Indra Makaraitytė from our TV department. She led this investigation, and a lot of public details are known because of her work, so she collaborated with other teams in Poland as well. So the story goes, basically the exploding parcels were sent out of Lithuania through international logistics companies. And last year, there were 3 major incidents that occurred in July, and one was prevented due to the border guards coming in contact with that parcel and confiscating it before it detonated. So a fire caught in Leipzig airport, another fire, the parcel exploded in a storage facility in Birmingham, in a DHL storage facility, and another one was in Poland in a DPD storage logistics facility. So it's suspected that the whole attempt was to probably bring down a cargo plane. If those parcels bursted out mid-flight, it could cause some serious damage. So supposedly this was the goal, but they ended up exploding at the wrong time, I guess. And it also turns out that the whole scheme was supposed to be carried out a whole month earlier. That was the original plan. And a Lithuanian citizen named Aleksandras Shuranovas was recruited by the Russian military intelligence to send those explosive parcels. And he was supposed to find the explosive materials that were left by the Russian intelligence in one of the apartments. It was a newly built apartment that was rented through Airbnb. So the owners weren't aware of this. So the GRU basically rented this apartment. They placed some objects with explosive devices in it, and then this Alexander Shuranovas was supposed to come and pick those devices and then send to another place. So basically, he couldn't find this apartment. There were some issues with, he couldn't get inside or something. So basically, the Russians left explosives at an apartment and it wasn't picked up. The guy failed at his job, So later it turned out that these devices were somehow deactivated because they didn't reach their targets, and the apartment complex was not the whole target of this operation. And he eventually did succeed with another attempt. It took about a month for them to try again, I suppose. And there were 4 separate and prepared explosive devices that were left for him in another hotel. This time it was not left for him. There was a person, and they came into contact. He received those 4 already prepared devices from the Russian intelligence operatives. And it was 4 of these parcels. The explosive material in them was nitromethane, which is like a paste toothpaste kind of a material that explodes, And it's kind of also interesting because all of those exchanges happened right in the center of Vilnius. The second object is right near where the old town begins. It's kind of, touristy bar area where a lot of leisure time is happening, and they kind of conducted this in this environment. My own apartment is basically 1 kilometer away from that place where they exchanged it. He was supposed to send 2 of these devices to United Kingdom and 2 to Poland, and basically he eventually did manage to send those devices on 19th of July. And he used a fake name, of course, to send those parcels out. But there is a whole kind of scheme discovered that the same guy who did send these devices out also participated in another sabotage operation. There were other unrelated events with this. There was a mall fire in Poland a few years ago, and the organizer, who was a young Ukrainian guy, I believe he was 17 years old, who was recruited by the Russian intelligence. But the explosive materials that he used was provided by the same guy, Alexandra Shuranovas. So he kind of, helped to coordinate this one. He wasn't the one who did the job, but he was the one who passed the explosive materials for the guy. And the same guy, the Ukrainian citizen, he also set a fire in Vilnius IKEA supermarket. So this was also an event that kind of caught a lot of attention here, because the attack was not carried out at night or something. It was basically during the day that the supermarket was set ablaze. And the only reason, I guess, why there was no mass casualty events, because the fire sirens, worked, the alarm worked, everyone was evacuated in time, so we basically avoided tragedy. But it's kind of hard to look at this whole situation as it's just basically an attempted assassination for a mass casualty event. So yeah, so Shuranovas was involved in both of these attacks in the supermarkets and also sending the parcels out. So it's more of a widespread range of network of Russian intelligence. And the guy who set the IKEA fire ablaze was literally on his way to Riga to do another attack, but he was luckily stopped by the border guards who confiscated the device and basically stopped him. So yeah, it's pretty constant situation. I mean, there's always in Vilnius, not only in Vilnius, but if you happen to live close to Russia, yeah, there's always an attempt to do some sort of intimidation attacks or something like that.
So can you tell us about the authorities and why they believe these Parcel bombs were intended to bring down a cargo jet? I mean, this is something that they all seem to agree on. So can you tell us a little bit about the intelligence behind that and really, again, incompetence in Russian plots is something we're very familiar with in the West in covering. But I suppose what we don't do is manage to cover the ones in which the incompetence isn't so visible. There have been, several high-profile murders that have been suspected of Russian military intelligence involvement that we have not had any sufficient evidence managed to find for them. But when we have the Skripals and so on and so forth, we've had these cases, the Litvinenko poisoning, in which Russian incompetence along the way has made it obvious who the perpetrators are. So could you talk to us about that intelligence and how it's been linked to Russian military intelligence?
Yes, of course. So basically both Polish and Lithuanian prosecutors kind of agree that it was a coordinated plot from the Russian intelligence. There's enough names and paper trails and everything that fits into the into the story. Basically, the incompetence part is also kind of the first part about the guy failing to collect these devices is probably the biggest sign of incompetence. When he sent out those devices, it's probably very hard to time when exactly which plane is gonna do a flight to your destination, which was supposed to detonate at the moment. So it's a very complicated thing, I guess, to calculate precisely if you send a parcel and it's gonna get picked up by a certain plane who's gonna then fly, and it should explode at the very exact moment. So it is a complicated operation. So they obviously failed at achieving that, but they did set ablaze a lot. It was the attempt, and they eventually still did set ablaze logistics facilities. So it's interesting how they smuggled the devices into Lithuania. I mean, there's a guy known Alexander Miroshkinov, who is he's a Russian nuclear submarine captain that worked until 1995. So he basically used his connections to organize the transportation from St. Petersburg, I believe, where one of his close friends, Drew, organized it to enter the European Union space through Latvia. So they entered the Schengen zone through Latvian border, and the devices themselves were hidden in a few objects. One of them was like a massage pillow for a neck. There were some interesting. Even prosecutors named that a few of them were hidden inside sex toys. They didn't specify what kind of, so we can only, I guess, speculate. But there were some sort of objects that they were already packed inside. So when they crossed the border, they were basically just left in the apartment. So when the next renter comes in, which is the guy who was recruited, was supposed to just pick them up and use these parcels to send them further away. So yeah, I think all of this situation kind of, it's not just these few instances. There's a lot of more other aspects that are still being investigated. There are other attacks that were stopped. So it depends on how far this goes. But these concrete actions are kind of linked enough, and there's Lithuanian authorities are now looking for 3 Russian citizens: Andrei Baburov, Yaroslav Mikhailov, and Tom Dogvan Stabichinsko, who is also a Lithuanian citizen. So these are all of the names known that are involved in this plot. So these, and some of these guys are top tier military officials that used to be like a captain of a nuclear submarine. Some of these are lower tier, but it's kind of obvious.
So my question, I guess, is who have the authorities managed to capture so far? I mean, they have made at least one arrest, right? So who has been captured by the authorities, and what is the plan for these others? Because obviously, once these potential assassins head across the border back to Russia, they often get promoted and made members of parliament in Russia and given heroes medals for their crimes. But there is a total impunity for what once they have managed to make it into Russia. So what's the situation with who is actually that the authorities have in custody, and what's the situation with those who are still fugitives?
So the guy who was distributing these parcels is arrested. It's Alexander Shuravnovas. He's the whole process being conducted around him, and so he's in the Lithuanian authorities' hands. The process is continuing. The Ukrainian citizen I mentioned before that caused the fire in the Kiev was also detained. I'm not sure where he is exactly, but which country is which authorities are holding him, but he's been caught. Miroshkino, which helped to transport these devices, is known but is not under custody under our authorities. And so, yeah, basically Baburov, Mikhailov, and Stabachinsko are the ones that are actively being searched. So others have been detained. Their role in this is also, we're just still trying to figure out. There's like a lot of info that is still coming up with this daily. So we're also following this and developing this and following this as well as all of these other Russian provocations that are happening. It's not just here. It's a quite widespread provocation campaign happening at the moment everywhere.
So I mean, look, this sounds like a really difficult position for the Baltic states to be in. Can you talk to us about the wider campaign that Russia has been waging against your countries? I mean, you can broaden it out beyond Lithuania, of course. And, I think other parts of Europe may not understand why the Baltic states are so invested in Ukraine and are funding Ukraine to a much higher percentage of GDP than any other country. Like it dwarfs the Poland and,
well, I think
the
Denmark
Baltic states.
Is also up there. Yeah.
Okay, but you know what I mean. These are
of course.
Yeah, these are countries that are punching well above their weight when it comes to supplying Ukraine with weaponry. And can you talk to us about that and what Russia has really been doing in your countries since that full-scale invasion began?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are a few aspects that are surprising and some that are not surprising at all. Russia has been pretty belligerent towards its neighbors since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and there's a slight difference that I would like to emphasize about how they behave and treat countries that they perceive as being big and strong or somewhat comparable to Russia. I mean, there's a very different approach that the Russians used for decades. I mean, when it comes to a relationship with Germany or, United States even, or some sort of bigger partners. But when it comes to like their smaller neighbors in the region, they have always been using the tactics of not outright sabotage, but very, very aggressive means to coerce those neighbors into basically following whatever Russia is willing to. There's a number of examples, whenever Lithuania declares independence from Soviet occupation, they impose like a 4-month economic blockade, shutting down, all gas supplies during winter or whatever. Whenever Lithuania chooses to join European Union and like partnership with the West, same year, let's say the Druzhba pipeline, you might have heard, there was also a branch going to Lithuania. They immediately cut it off with like no hope to ever restoring it again. So it hasn't been operational since we joined European Union. So there's always this pressure attempts to pressure the neighbors into coercing them and doing whatever Russia wants to. But of course, over the years, as Russia has grown more aggressive in its approach and openly invading their neighbors, their tactics towards other neighbors that they're not at war openly, they also kind of increased in aggressiveness and brazenness. So it was kind of expected that they will use any kind of means that they can to infiltrate, try to cause as much chaos or panic in the societies that they try to intimidate, I guess. But I wouldn't say it's working all that much, because I don't think anyone in Lithuania is surprised by those acts. They're kind of, well, of course, everyone is following it very closely. It's important and big development, but nothing about this is causing panic or something like that. And no one is really surprised, because when they launched the full-scale invasion in 2022, it was kind of obvious. It was obvious for us before that they're kind of very adversarial. That they kind of became open enemies for entire Europe is basically kind of a no-brainer for a majority of Lithuanians. So expecting these kind of attacks is basically a given almost.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is about how the Lithuanian public are reacting to this bomb plot story in particular. It's important to note that the country I'm from, Britain, we've had history. Obviously, I've mentioned them already: the Litvinenko poisoning and the Skripal poisonings, both one using radiological and one using chemical weapons. And it's important to note that I think people may dispute this, but this story had a huge impact on domestic politics. It really cut through. And Jeremy Corbyn, who was the leader of the Labour Party at the time, who were the party of opposition, he was very reluctant to blame Russia or defend the country strongly in response to that. He was much more sympathetic. He even in Parliament suggested sending samples of the poison to Russia to see if it's theirs or not, and that went down so badly with the public. His image never recovered from that. So this was a huge story in Britain. Obviously, this was one that could have had huge ramifications for the area of Salisbury in particular, following the Skripal poisonings. So what is the impact that this story is having on the public in Lithuania? Understandably, they're already a country that was quite outspokenly pro-Ukraine. But I imagine, is this driving up a further hawkishness in society, a further desire to militarize and to prepare for a conflict with Russia?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to tell, because, well, I think there's also a very interesting thing to emphasize, because when you're talking about a lot of Western countries, whether it's United Kingdom, whether it's Germany especially, and France or whatever, there was a lot of I guess, understandable naivete when it comes to Russia, at least until Crimea invasion, basically. But also even after that, I mean, Germany signed Nord Stream 2 after, Crimea was annexed. So there was a lot of trying to, not judge Russia, trying to understand them, trying to, hopefully hoping that Russia would one day become more a democratic or more inclusive country. So they didn't have this the society itself. I mean, the politicians, but certainly the wider society, did not perceive Russia as a threat. So when it materialized with the Skripal case and with other acts of sabotage, I do assume it probably was a bit of a shocker moment. For Lithuania, it's not really shocking, not for politicians, not even for regular people, because basically, since the war in Georgia, Lithuania has been very, very critical of Russia, and it's been pretty obvious that it's not a country that you can get along with unless they dominate you. I mean, that's basically the goal, and if you don't really agree with that, you're better go look for allies, or there's gonna be problems. So one concrete example, when they invaded Georgia, there was a very broad push from Lithuania and Poland. Both of our presidents flew to Tbilisi to show support as the tanks are approaching, storming Tbilisi. And the reaction in the West was very mild. There was basically some critiques, but there was nothing too much. So there was already this countries here in Poland and Lithuania trying to grab as much attention and show this is what's happening, but it gets kind of ignored because everyone still wants to pretend that perhaps it's just one thing and Russia will stop doing this or something like that. So after Lithuania pushes is being very vocally critic about it, they punish Lithuania by imposing the highest price for gas in all of Europe, basically at the time. If you look like at the prices at 2009 or 2010, we were paying like 20% more than Germany was, and it was at the time the only way for us to get gas, like logistically wise, because it was the only pipeline that we could use. So they absolutely used this to the most of their advantage, and it also was a very good a wake-up call for Lithuania that if you really want to be independent from Russia, you have to be 100% ready to shut your whole energy sector without their input at all. So this was the moment when Lithuania started constructing the LNG terminal. I mean, it was kind of obvious. They're using their monopoly of gas to pressure. How do we solve this? Okay, there's a new technology in South Korea. We're one of the first in Europe to, let's buy this LNG terminal and let's call it independence, and let's show Russia they're not gonna push us around, and we'll find ways to work around it. But basically, it has always been this kind of adversarial approach where they do everything they can to push us around, and we do what we can to find ways around it. So this dynamic has been going on for basically decades, and since the fall of Soviet Union, I guess, and even this building that I'm currently sitting right now, back in 91, Soviet military stormed this place trying to take it over by force. So, there are still people who worked there, who worked at the time, some of my colleagues. So it's a pretty living memory, for a lot of people here.
So I'd quite like to know, because again, I don't really know much about the political scene on the fringes in these countries. Obviously, in Britain, in parts of the West, as you said it, my perspective really comes from Western Europe, of the people who exist on the fringes of those political scenes, the far left and the far right. I mean, obviously, Jeremy Corbyn was on the far left, and the positions that they took on Russia have often been, sympathetic to Russia. Not every part of the left or right, on the fringes does. There are obviously examples of pro-Ukrainian far right and pro-Ukrainian far left figures in these countries. But I wondered, what is the opposition to Ukraine, like the political opposition to supporting Ukraine, like in Lithuania? How much purchase do those guys have? How do they do in the polling? Are they complete outsiders? I mean, in the UK, we have Nigel Farage, and he has been someone who had a show on Russian state media, who has been frequently gushing in his praise for Putin. He has tried to walk some of that back in recent years because of how unpopular that position is in the UK, still a country that very much supports Ukraine. But I'm interested into the political opposition. Obviously, the proximity to Russia means that Russia is probably investing a lot more in these people than they are in the cranks. Like, not that they aren't investing in, as I said, George Galloway and Nigel Farage having shows on these channels are not accidents. They are there's a reason that they are on those channels, and they are getting well paid to be on those channels. So could you talk to me about those figures in Baltic politics, and how widely accepted are they in society?
Well, Lithuania is kind of has been blessed by the fact that pretty solidly there's always been a very strong majority for like strategic direction where the country is going, and all the pro-Russia sympathizing forces, they basically had no real chance of attaining majority in parliament or through even before the invasion. If you look at the results of the surveys throughout the years, I mean, around 75% solidly support NATO membership. And European Union is also, Lithuania is one of the countries who has the highest approval rating for the European Union. I think a lot of Lithuanians appreciate that they have been, part of this bigger European community, and it's also a very good forum for us to, speak up and express, our concerns about Russia. So the society itself, I mean, there are some fringe parties who are kind of trying to grift towards that. None are openly pro-Russia. That's a poison. That's if you say I want Russia to win, no chance a single party will cross the 5% barrier. They're not reaching parliament. The pro-Russia sympathizers are basically like kind of anti-vax populists that use this whole anti-establishment narrative. They're mostly anti-establishment and anti-parties that are currently ruling, but it's very hard for them to be openly pro-Russia. There is a segment that, some few activists that, a couple of dozen guys or at max maybe 100 show up for some sort of demonstration. Some of them are being, not directly, but funded. It has been discovered that they are being funded by the Russian organizations. There is one, Shvenchanin, and Neringa Shvenchanin has been like pretty much nobody in Lithuania. She has never been a politician, but she only kind of became famous because she participated in the elections of the Crimea referendum. And there was also a lot of, everyone kind of was confused about, our citizens participating there. There was calls for, maybe revoking her citizenship or something like that. That didn't pass through. But so there are certain individuals that, try to express themselves. There is a small niche in the internet, but I'd say it's not very, very effective in a sense that, and I also don't think Russia is focusing most of its efforts in the Baltic states or Lithuania at the moment, because society itself is very allergic to Russian imperialism, let's say. I mean, if you go basically throughout pretty much every family in Lithuania, there are some stories of someone being directly affected by it, so it's going to be very, very hard for them to convince to be openly pro-Russia. So I think they choose to spend most of their efforts and money and everything that they can somewhere else. Basically, what they are trying to do is cause as much chaos, panic, and fear. I think that's kind of what they're going for, because convincing, majority of Lithuanians to support Russia is kind of nothing. I think they recognize that they cannot do that. So basically, torpedoing the process of forming a government, maybe funding some anti-vaxxer, anti-establishment, populist candidates that are angry at everything. That might work to an extent, but it's also kind of a limited ability for them to really affect the situation.
So I guess I'd like to hear, more about what the Lithuanian government is doing for Ukraine. Again, it's part of the Baltic states are all putting forward this amount. So maybe you could tell us about why the Lithuanian government is spending so much compared to other countries. And there's also been talk about, the coalition of the willing, and, we've definitely had guests on here who've dismissed that idea as something that might actually happen because of how far away a peace deal to even enforce with Russia really is. But as I understand it, the Baltic states have also at least offered in these discussions to put troop deployments, large ones, inside Ukraine. So can you talk to us about that and how the public feel about potential Baltic troops deployed inside Ukrainian territory?
Well, I haven't noticed really a big of a backlash towards it, but also it's not a plan that is being, pushed for every day. I think kind of majority understands that the peace is still pretty far away, and we kind of need more clarity as to what kind of rules are going to be there, what kind of situation is going to be there. So I think most are pretty open to the idea, as long as it's being done together with, other European partners, being part of a bigger coalition. is something that I guess both government and people could agree with. But then again, that depends on the situation on the ground and what kind of peace are we trying to preserve. I mean, so why Lithuania is spending that much, I don't think it's spending, it's investing. I mean, it's our own security as well, and there is a threat for all of us, whether you're from the north in Norway all the way down to Bulgaria. The threat is pretty much the same. We also, we see Poland stepping up. Germany is investing kind of a lot of, at least starting to, wake up and try to invest their money into the industrial complex, and even the partnership Lithuania is developing with Rheinmetall. They're building an artillery plant factory here in Lithuania. The Germans deploying their brigade here. What really encourages me is the cooperation between the Nordic and the Baltic countries. I mean, the relationship was always kind of good, but it wasn't going out of its way to be some sort of extra partners. But since the invasion, basically, and since Trump became so not really a reliable partner for most of us in the region, I think coordination between Baltic states and, let's say, Finland, Sweden, Denmark has increased exponentially. I mean, it's kind of normal for our leaders to consultate, to discuss a common position before they, let's say, go represent this whole region into a bigger forum where maybe some others are not there at the moment, but we're kind of speaking for one another in that regard. Just yesterday, Sweden and Poland had military exercises to defend Gotland. I mean, it wasn't just between these two countries, but they basically worked as to, let's say, there's an attack on Gotland. Poland needs to send their military forces, their air defense, everything. How are they doing this? So they basically exercised this yesterday. Just today, there's news that Turkey has deployed AWACS planes here in Lithuania just to help, guard the drones. So there are interesting developments. I'm kind of encouraged by it. These countries are trying their best to step up. There is a question about the biggest partner in the alliance, I suppose. How reliable is it still? But the European side it's a slow and frustrating, train that is a bit starting to move a little bit in the right direction, and hopefully we can maintain this momentum. And there's still optimism to be found here. So yeah.
Well, look, we're reaching the back end of the show now, so if any of the audience have any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat. Again, if you're one of the 1,200 people watching along on Twitter and you want to engage with the show, please do jump onto Twitch, create an account, follow the channel, and send a message in the box. We'll be happy to answer any questions you guys throw over there. We always get a few normally. And yeah, listen, if you're watching along on YouTube, obviously can't participate in the show live, but you guys are equally as important, and any comments that you write down below, I will definitely read. And please do consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. So look, my final question to you, I guess, is about what Lithuania is doing to prepare for potential, if touch wood, this doesn't happen, but if Ukraine does fall, Russia's going to be on your doorstep. It's going to believe, the Russian government already believes, it's at war with NATO. So if they defeat Ukraine, which again, I don't think is on the cards, but obviously if you are sat in Vilnius right now, you have to prepare for that. So could you talk to us about, actually the build-up of the military power on the Lithuanian side, and what you're doing, particularly with regards to, are there potential reinforcements on that border? Is there trench digging going on? I mean, is there anti-tank stuff going up in place? It'd be interesting to know how serious Lithuania is taking its actual forward line of defense with Russia.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll give a couple of things that I think we're doing pretty well. I'm going to give a couple of things that we're kind of failing at the moment, where we need to step up, and then I guess the broad, stroke. So what I think has been doing, the government has been doing, basically the previous one said it's in motion, but it's being continued by the Social Democrat one. It's both increasing the military spending, of course. 5% is what's interesting in Lithuania. Nobody's questioning it. If you say 5% defense like 5 or 6 years ago, hats would have got on fire. It still would have been a very big ask. Today, 5%, 5.5 is kind of a no-brainer. Of course, we're gonna have to build up the division. The Lithuania is kind of forming its first armor division. We're buying in the near future, German tanks, Leopard 1s, Leopard 2s, the most modern ones, and also a lot of new acquisitions coming in place. CV90, artillery systems. HIMARS is supposed to reach us pretty much at the moment. The training is already taking place. Caesar's coming in. So there is military equipment building up. There's also the defensive line that is being constructed. The border itself with Belarus and Russia has been basically shut. There's still 2 border crossings with Belarus open with like minimal transportation happening, basically to facilitate families that live, maybe someone has like relatives on the other side of the border base for those kind of events, but it's not a big logistics chain. Not like Poland that still had a lot of very important railways that go through border with Belarus. The defensive line is kind of ambitious one. It's starting to get constructed. It's still at the early stages, so I'm not gonna say that we already have this like a big wall. We're trying to build it and construct it. It's gonna be in 3 sections basically. Anti-tank installations, anti-personnel mines. We've already left the convention that forbids the use of it. Lithuanian companies are going to be building those mines. We're going to basically set up points that are critical, that we decide this is a critical point. We build a logistics basically bunker nearby that in case we need it, there's not going to be mines all over the place all the time, but in case we notice there's a buildup on the border, we need to do something. Okay, so we roll out the anti-tank, anti-personnel mines like in a day or 2 or something like that. There's bunkers being designed and already approved. They're going to start constructing pretty solid fortifications. So I expect a pretty solid iron curtain, descending on the borders, but that's kind of the reality that we live in. What we do kind of fail at the moment, I think, is the shelter program. I mean, if there's like a full-scale war, there's not enough shelters in Vilnius or in bigger cities for us to, to make sure that everyone has a safe place to hide. This is something that needs to be worked out, but I guess you can't really do everything at the same time. There's priorities. The first thing, I guess, that a lot of money and effort went into was reconstructing most important bridges and roads, so that heavy tanks and equipment could reach the border areas that they needed to in time. So it's a long process, to prepare all of the infrastructure that's needed for such a defense. But basically, you have to prepare for the worst in this situation, and having Lithuania's experience and with numerous Russian occupations throughout history, it's what is really encouraging, I guess, for me personally, is that for most of the time that we fought the Russians in the past, we were kind of basically on our own, or with at least sometimes with Poland or some other countries. Now we have some solid partners we can work with, and that's already better situation than we had for a lot part of our history. So I'm glad for our friends and allies in Europe, and also in America, in Canada, everywhere.
Well, look, obviously, we that's something we hope never has to happen, and obviously we hope that that Ukraine wins this war, defends its territory successfully, and pushes the Russian invasion back, because the alternative, as you've quite rightly said, is really horrific to think about. So, look, food for thought. So much food for thought that we don't have any audience questions tonight. I'm disappointed in my audience, who normally fire 1 or 2. So, look, the last thing I ask you is, where can people find your work if they wanted to read more about, the kind of things that you've been covering? I know you're the foreign editor, but I suspect you do write on what's going on there too.
I write sometimes, but my majority of my work is live on air, or doing interviews or stories for a radio in Lithuanian language. So it's for me, I don't really advertise it as much for on Twitter or somewhere else, because not a lot of people understand Lithuanian, and that's like majority of my content is in that language. And
we're in the Google Translate era. I mean, everyone just Google translates everything now.
So there are sometimes there's an article on like a bigger story that I work on, but most of it is live on air. So you would have to record it and translate it. It's extra work for it's difficult. So radio is kind of a bit of on its own in this regard, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had that issue when I came to Ukraine to do reporting, and I wasn't writing that many articles. I did actually write, I think it was 6 or 7 articles, maybe one more in that first 3 months that I was here. But there were people on Twitter going, he's not doing anything, and it's because I was doing radio and TV like every half an hour. I was like on another, and like you don't clip up everything and put it on Twitter. So there were people saying that you're not doing anything, even though my invoice list was like this long at the end of every week. So I mean, look, thanks so much for coming on. And I will put your X account in the show notes so people can follow along there. I will encourage you to put more stuff out in English, but if you can't, then as I said, everyone Google translates everything now. It's particularly Telegram, which is very useful.
I do recommend our colleagues here in LRT. There's a website in English. It's basically the same website that we have in Lithuanian language, basically for a foreign audience, lrt.en, and all of the Lithuanian news from my colleagues here, you can basically read. They're one of the best covering it. So.
Well, look, as I wanted to point out, it's a really important part of the world. It's a part of the world that's getting overlooked, and you guys are, proud liberal democracies that stand up for human rights and stuff. So it's really important that part of the reason that NATO gets such a bad stick with these Western leftist groups is they think it has been imposed on countries like yours, rather than you guys are proud to be, and talk about Britain pulling out of NATO or whatever. It's basically saying, this is my position anyway, it's basically saying, no, we won't come to your defense. And if you're a country like Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia, it's very difficult to fight a war against. You are either going to lose. Yeah, you're either going to lose, or you're going to be in an alliance with stronger nations. So
the whole process of joining, for just like a very short brush, a lot of people imagine that somehow NATO just kind of happened to be here, but 9 different governments that absolutely hated their guts. 9 governments since 91 to 2004 that when we joined, they disagreed about everything, but like joining NATO was the most important goal, that if they stand like they're getting carried out with pitchforks by people, they had to agree on this.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, as someone who was quite critical of NATO myself growing up, it has only become more important. It is the most important multilateral organization in the world. In my opinion, it is more important than the United Nations, because the United Nations is fundamentally broken. Because it's broken, I mean, look, I'm not saying that every United Nations department doesn't do something of some importance, but they don't function. It doesn't function as a body with the UN Security Council veto. So, but NATO, we're having problems. Don't get me wrong, with member states, Turkey, Hungary, the USA, but largely it's all pulling in the same direction, has done since those new member states joined. So yeah, look, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think maybe we should do a wider NATO episode. But yeah, listen, thanks so much for joining us, Vytautas. I will definitely put your information in the show notes so people can check out your work. Please do come along in the future and give us an update on how Lithuania's defenses are being built. All right. Thanks so much.
Happy.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Ta-ra.